All right, we are live with the Lutheran Church Planning Network for our second ever live interview with a church planter. And there we go. This is going to work after all. Third time is the charm. All right, it says adding. Hey, Ted.
Hey, Matthew,
We
how
got
you
it,
doing,
man.
man? That's right.
Third time's the charm.
Yeah, we just had to, millennials, right?
I know, right? I'm like, man, I'm 34. I should know how to get Facebook Live to work, but it's
Well, they change it every 5 minutes, so
that's the problem. It's totally
it's
their
not our
problem.
fault.
That's it. That's
yeah.
totally it. Yeah. Man, I'm excited to have you with us, and I was just sharing you are the second ever interview, so that makes you really important and special.
Well, I agree. I'm important and special.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So, Pastor Ted Doering is serving a church in Georgetown, Texas, a Narrative Church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's your website?
Just narrative.church.
Narrative.church.
We landed it early, so,
right, so
we got the golden one.
Everyone can check that out as they're listening to you share about what God's doing there. And really, my heart with this is we're not a well-oiled production machine here. Pretty informal. I shot you.
I was waiting
questions.
for graphics to just come across the screen.
Yeah,
so.
you know what? When I upload it to YouTube, maybe we'll do some cool graphics.
That's it.
But
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
But other than your high-end prop behind you. That's as cool as we get right now.
I like that you've got the great theology going on behind you, and just pitchers and catchers report this week, so it's a good week.
Yes. So a couple questions that we'll just wanted to hear from you and what God is doing through Narrative Church and how you got to where you're at. So we'll just maybe start off with a really big question, and that is, give us your life story in a nutshell. How did you get to where you're at?
Great. So 3 hours on this Facebook Live.
Yes.
No, so I started off. I grew up in north of Houston, so was born in Colorado.
The flag.
But that's the flag. So my dad's family's from Texas, and they're actually from Galveston, but grew up Astros fans, and so it's been a long time that we've been in the club. So it was funny when we won 2 years ago. Dad's first call was to Mom. He was out of town. He called her and said, thanks for putting up with me for so long. But so I born in Colorado, but spent my formative years in Kingwood, which is a suburb just north of Houston. My dad is a pastor there, and pretty young knew I wanted to go into the ministry and do something. And when I was in college, I started serving with what was our night chapel. It's gone through some different names, but it was the student-led evening chapel. And through that process, we had to set up and tear down every week just because of the different needs that we had versus regular chapel throughout the week. And so I got a sense of kind of, okay, well, what's this whole portable thing like now? The nice thing then was we had a closet that we moved everything in and out of. But kind of got a little taste of that and got to connect with some church planters in the Austin area, which is where I went to school. And through that process, really kind of started thinking, hey, this might be something I'd really enjoy to do, and started pursuing and looking more into it to see where God, was leading. And as we went along, what I really discovered, kind of my call to it, was not that church was bad, that, that there were all these other places that, they're worse off. But I looked and said, hey, this is something that there's potential not only for us to try some new things without having a built-in culture behind it, but also to say, the phrase new and different churches reach new and different people. And for me, as I started leaning into that, I really realized that got me excited. That was really what, in being a pastor, I looked forward to say, okay, how do we take what we have, the good news, how we have Jesus for everyone, and how do we connect with people that aren't in churches? And for me, this is one method. This is where I feel called. I think there are established churches that do this too, but for me, church planting was the way to go. And so from there, my wife and I got married a year after college, went to seminary in St. Louis, and we went through 4 years of seminary, and there was a little bit of training at our seminary for that. And then as we came out, really said, hey, this is what we'd like to do. And it really, God lined it up that not only did we end up getting to plant a church, but the mother church that it has been with us, walked alongside us the whole time, is actually my wife's home church.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Faith Lutheran in Georgetown, who planted us, my wife grew up going there. And so it's been a really neat experience. Her parents are a part of our church, which is really cool. And that's been a huge blessing. And so for me, it really was God led me here. Because there's, I think sometimes people look at church planting and, every industry, if you can call the church an industry, has kind of the people that you look and go, oh man, I wish I had that, that looks sexy and that looks cool. And it's like, just imagine doing everything you do as a pastor, but without a secretary and anyone else. So it's been just such a different road than I even imagined it, but it's been what I've loved. And I've had some great people, from family members to folks at our church to people around us who've just walked alongside of us the whole way. So that's been really pretty cool.
So how long have you been there now?
So Narrative will turn 4 in October.
Okay.
So we launched. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're going where I was going to ask.
So we launched in October of 2015.
Okay.
So I came straight out of seminary here. So that was summer of 2014. And then I came in and did 8 months of what they called church planter in residence, where I was a church planter and an associate pastor at Faith. And there was part of me that was like, man, I'm ready to go. But there's a lot of wisdom of the people who planned it out, because I got a chance to catch my breath. We had done so much moving. Our seminary was set up 2 years on campus, a year internship, and then back for another year on campus. And so we knew how to move. Like, it was like, yeah, you go, you're done. And so my wife and I didn't realize what putting down roots really meant, right? Like it was this thing of, hey, we've got this. How do we keep it going? And so having those 8 months to slow down and go, oh, we get to invest. Like, we get to be present. That was really what we needed, and a lot of wisdom on the part of our church. And when we rolled into, so I did 75% with the mother church, 25% planting. Okay. And then as we rolled into the new year of 2015, 50-50, and then we had other dates where I went 75-25 and then 100%. And so we launched then in fall of 2015.
So where did the vision for planting in Georgetown, where did that come from? Was that from Faith? Was it from you? Was it from area director?
Yes. So we actually, it was, as my wife Chelsea and I talked about it, the call process coming out of seminary for us is really kind of like, thank you, sir, may I have another? You take your first call and you go. And so we prayed a lot, and we're just hoping that God was going to send us somewhere. And what was really reassuring for us is when this was presented to us, when they came up to interview us in St. Louis, we looked at each other and said, I mean, this is where we wanted to end up when we retired, someday. But if this call were anywhere else, it would be the one for us. That was God reassuring, the way they had set it up, the way they had built it up in the congregation, that they had spent 3 years just teaching on church planting.
Wow.
So the people were prepped and ready to go. And I think every church has different speeds at which they do that. And this is a very in-depth Bible study crew. And so they just, they planted seeds and planted seeds and planted seeds. But the nice thing about it was they've always referred to me as the first church planter, that the plan is to keep planting. And so they really built up that foundation as we came in. And they had a church planting parenting team. So it was about, I don't know, 10, 15 folks, and they just got together and really set us up for a lot of great foundational kind of things. And leading that charge was Walt Poland, who's the pastor at our mother church, and Paul and Becky Krentz, who are now members of Narrative. And Paul had been, for our district of the LCMS, the Texas district, he had been what we call mission in, MMF, mission and ministry facilitator. See, I was going to forget something, so there it was. But so Paul had been helping out. His area had been Dallas. They lived here in Georgetown, but he was the North Texas guy, and he had helped church planting up there. And so he helped facilitate and teach and bring in the right people to talk about it. And so they really did a lot of groundwork, this parenting team. They stepped in, and not only did they put together a lot of stuff for us and put together the search for a pastor to come down here and lead it, but they had demographic studies. They had a basic budget. They had people from the parenting team who said, hey, we want to be a part of this. And so what was really neat was we stepped in, and a lot of that stuff was done for us. But as we stepped in, they were very open in saying, hey, listen, we've identified this place between Round Rock, which is the city just south of us, and Georgetown, where it's just rapidly growing together. And we think this would be a good place for a church. But we understand that you're the person coming in. So if you think of somewhere else, you're more than welcome to do that. And it was like, no, thanks for figuring that out. Like, this is great. And they really hit the nail on the head. Since we've been here 4 years, and with my wife's parents living in Georgetown throughout college, we would come up and visit. It's about 30 minutes north of Austin. The growth out here has just been
huge.
Rapid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so they picked a great place. They walked alongside of us. They set up that budget. And from that parenting team, I think there are two, if not three, families now that are leading families and founding partners of narrative.
That's amazing. And I love that vision of a mothering church. I really think that there's a lot of models for church planning, but that model of a mother church who has a reputation in town, being able to send a couple people, be there. That's just a beautiful, beautiful model for church planning.
Well, and what was really cool is when we came in, they gave us they called it a fishing license. I was allowed to talk to anyone I wanted and ask anyone I wanted to join us. Now, I always made sure to honor Pastor Poland and go to him and say, all right, listen, this is who I'm going to ask. And I understand if you got to say no. And he always said yes. He was always very open to wherever we were going and to the people we asked. And so from that point, we started then in January of 2015 doing community group Bible studies, talking about vision, talking about where we'd be going. Then we did some preparation worship over the summer together and did some preview services. And then launch for us, the determination is, okay, when are we going to be here every week? When are we going to start telling people we'll be back next Sunday? And that was October 1st of 2015. So
that was a pretty quick ramp up from January to October.
Yeah, and I think if I could, I would never do it differently. The journey we've been on is our journey.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is how I'm built, that in terms of my leadership style and where I'm going and where we were about as ready as we could be. And then we needed to learn our mistakes as we got going, right? Now, there are some other people, our friends Mark and Laura Pulliam are working and planting in North Houston now, and
they're on the list to be interviewed too, so don't give away too much of the story. So
I won't give away too much, but they just sent out in an email today their timeline for planting, and I think they've got a really good. Theirs is a little longer, and I think again, I wouldn't change what we did, but I don't think it hurts to go longer. And I was also very young when we planted. I mean, I was right out of seminary. I was 28. There were nights I'd wake up and go, people trust me to do this. Like, why? but so we had some growing pains. We had some things, but what's been great in that is that I have incredible leadership who's walked alongside me. I've never felt alone. And so we've had some amazing, amazing people who have walked alongside us with that.
That's really good. You mentioned in St. Louis. Did you go to Concordia in Austin?
I did.
Okay,
I
so
did.
Concordia Concordia, St. Louis. You mentioned some of the training that they had. What did that look like? Was that assessment, class-based?
Yeah, it was. So I did a thing called the Church Planner Assessment, and it's basically like open heart surgery for 3 days, and they basically take you and your significant other. So if you're engaged or if you are married, that they want your significant other there, and they basically just rapid fire you for 2.5 days of saying, okay, so tell us about the worst failure you've ever had. Tell us how you handled that. And I mean, they really, but they really ask good questions. And I think anyone looking to plant should try and find someone to do an assessment with them, because the truth is planting is going to be a different style of ministry in a lot of different ways. And to have kind of your heart like ripped open and looked at, and it gives you a chance to like kind of get exhausted in it a little bit and kind of figure out what's going on. It was really good for my wife, Chelsea, and I, because we said, yeah, no, even like we really want to do this. And so that assessment was a part of it. There was a lot too that was just kind of self-taught that I was constantly reading. I was in touch. I had friends who were church planting, or I made friends who were church planting. That's a big thing I've noticed is church planters want to help plant churches. So if you're looking for someone to talk to, church planters will want to talk to you. They'll want to tell you what's going on. They'll want to give you that insight. And same, with I think most pastors, but it's this unique niche within the church that I was able to get connection with some folks who really helped me out and walked alongside me, and then had a lot of just encouragement from my family as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's really good. That's so true. I think I should have maybe opened up with this. I think the way that you and I met each other, I had attended a LCMS plant in Branson, Missouri.
Stop. So this is a Mark Hunsaker connection.
Right. And that right. So we were on vacation in Missouri, and I was like, all right, we were praying about church planting at the time. This was probably 2 years ago, I'm thinking. And we kind of knew it was coming down the line, and I found the church. We drove like 45 minutes to, worship with them in a vineyard, on a Sunday morning, and it was just pretty cool. And got to meet him, and we later in the week, we got together for coffee. That's what church planners do on vacation, right? You
right? Like, I'm not working.
Planners. Right. So Mark and I, we just hit it off and had great conversation. And I was like, yeah, I wish we could, I wish there were more Lutheran church planners and we could get together and talk more. I was like, who do you know who's doing it? And he listed a couple guys, and you were one of them because y'all were in sim together, right?
Yeah, we graduated together. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually was just on the phone with him today. So
that's funny. Yeah. So and then I don't know, I Facebooked you or something, and we had a couple great conversations back then, because that's before we came down here. We were praying about where, and we chatted. Yeah. And then we got another good mutual friend as well in Georgetown. But anyway, so that's fun. I want to keep moving here. So tell us. So you gave us history. Where are you at today? Then what's your current ministry scope? What does it look like as far as your worship, your attendance, your outreach, your small group ministry? Just kind of your vision of here's where we're at, and then here's where we want to go long term.
I think so. I'll start with kind of the nickels and noses stuff, right? I'll start in that area. We are financially pretty close to, for sure, financial independence in terms of outside organizations. Our district highly values church planting, and they're walking alongside us end of this year. But in terms of that, it was a good point for us to say, hey, yeah, we're good. And then our mother church, we have another 2 years with them, but it's kind of this decreasing. It's a great built-in way of saying, I think it was 3%, and it's walked down 0.5% the last couple of years. So we're at 1.5 now, and we could be at 0.5 next year. But we're hoping actually to be self-sufficient, that we could say, hey, start saving that next half for, for the next church plant. But so financially, we're in a really good place. We do have some outside givers, which really help us, people who see the mission and say, hey, we want to be a part of that. So that's been really cool. I'd say our connection-wise, in terms of people we have impact with, is at about 100. In terms of we hit 100 for the first time at Christmas, and I think in terms of our people and our leaders, those connections get us into the 100 range. We're low Sundays now are in the low 50s, and our high Sundays are in the mid 80s, and so we've seen that growth over 3.5 years. We haven't grown. I came in thinking like, oh, we're going to be so quick growing when you do all this stuff. And God was like, yeah, you're not ready for that, bro. And I was not. There was so much growth I needed to do. And so thankfully, God has grown the church at the speed. I don't want to say that I've needed, but that my leadership can handle. And that's been a huge blessing that he's, in his faithfulness, has allowed me to grow alongside our church. That I'm definitely not the leader I was, 4 years ago when we got here. And so that's been huge. And so that's kind of the nickels and noses. That's where that is. And then in terms of did you say how we connect?
Yeah. Like, what does your weekly ministry look like?
Yes. So weekly ministry for us really focuses worship on Sundays. And that's a good place for us to, just get together, connect, be together. And then we have community groups that run throughout the week that really we want to be, excellent. We want to keep growing in them. And we've had to relaunch them about 3 times. That we keep learning, okay, how can we do this better? How can we do this better? And I feel like this January we've really had some great leaders step into some spots that there's definitely room for us to grow there, but it's been really cool to see people step up, and we've seen some really cool things happening in terms of bringing community groups together. And then we serve together and we have fun together. So we'll either do some kind of financial kind of service where during Advent we do air mattresses for Advent, which is we're connected with the local school district, and the school district actually has quite a few homeless kids that may be living somewhere with a roof over their heads, but it's not their home, but they don't have beds. And so they ask for these self-inflating air mattresses. So we donate those. We built a playhouse for a local nonprofit preschool. We've done a bunch of, those kinds of service events. And then we meet in the middle school. And so we try, our phrase is we're not just renters. Like this, we want this to be community for us. So at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, we do breakfast for all the faculty and staff as they're getting done, just as a big thank you. A bunch of, if you're from Texas, kolaches and, fruit for people who aren't going to eat, bread and meat and donuts and all those kinds of things. And that's just been a really good place for us to stay connected to the school. But we're always asking, what can we do? So we've donated here and there. We've done trash pickups, those kinds of things. And then fun for us, I think as a church, sometimes we get so programmatic that we forget, like, hey, it's cool to like just hang out. So we just had the 4th annual Ted and Friends Invite Themselves Over Super Bowl party, which we have a leadership family who helped launch the church with us from our mother church. And the story is told in 2 different ways. My side goes, Chelsea, my wife, was out of town, and I thought, hey, I just want to hang out with these folks for the Super Bowl. So I said, hey, what are you guys doing? Can I come hang out and watch the Super Bowl with you? And what they heard was, hey, can I throw a Super Bowl party at your house? And so now every year we go back and forth and have a big joke about it. But it really is just people show up with their favorite, Super Bowl food, and we all share and hang out. And they've got a couple acres of land so the kids can run around, and we have a projector going. And it's just really a good time, and it's real simple. You show up, you hang out, and we try and do those kinds of things. There's a local brewery we're connected with here where we try and hang out. And we're trying to keep it simple. We know that complicated can make things harder, so we're trying to just keep it as simple as we can.
But man, everything you just mentioned though isn't simple, and that's part of the tension. I feel like with many church plants. I mean, what you mentioned is like the ideal mega church, which is, hey, we want you to worship here. We want you to be in a community group. We want you to have fun together. We want you to do outreach together. And you can't do all that in 1 week, but it is a lot in trying to juggle all those balls. I mean, you say simple, but that's a lot there, right?
Well, and the way we try and keep it simple is we look and say, number one, we continue to grow in handing things off, right? That it's how do we keep handing it off to people so more people can become involved? We try not to overdo in a month. So that's actually this year, Advent and Christmas. My brother works for me now. He's our worship and community groups guy. And we sat down after Christmas and kind of said, hey, we overdid it. We planned a couple different parties. We planned, midweek devotions together, and we did all these things, and we came out and said we broke our rule, which is like, don't get overcomplicated and don't get over busy. And so what keeps it simple is keeping it in terms of less is more. So a lot of the things I just mentioned, other people have a lot of ownership in that. And a lot of, when you spread it out, it gets more simple, and there's not a lot of moving parts. So like we do First Fridays at the brewery, and that's literally just like, hey, we'll be there at 6. And that's it. If you want to come, great. If not, good. And there are times where we got to call someone and go, hey, we're not going to be there. Do you mind watching over it? So, but I'd agree. There's a lot of moving parts. And one thing I've learned as a planner is trying to give away, which is what I'm bad at. I'm bad at giving things away. And I'm learning more and more to say, okay, how do I give this away and watch other people succeed?
That's good. That's super good. Yeah. And that's tough. So here's another question here. How does being Lutheran uniquely shape how you are planning Narrative Church?
So we talked about, and I'll start off by saying I stole this from one of my Baptist church planner buddies. But
hey, one second. Hey, Kurt.
Here in town.
Kurt's commenting on here, and he's gonna I'm gonna cut off comments here because he's keeps dropping comments about how great your beard is and drinking beer with other pastors. So
we'll keep that around. Kurt is our connection here in Georgetown together.
Yeah.
So
we love you, Kurt.
Yeah, we'll keep you around, Kurt. But for us, we don't talk mission and vision. We talk calling and culture, and that was something a friend of mine here in town, Andy, he planted a church, but they used that, and I thought, I really like that. That it's a little bit more than mission and vision, and a little less kind of businessese. That it's saying, hey, here's what we see the calling of our church as, and here's the culture we want to use as we do it. So for Narrative, our calling is to be disciples living the story of Jesus. To say, for us, that encompasses who we want to be and who we want to grow into at the end of the day. And then we have a culture that walks around that. So the first piece is the gospel. Jesus always front and center. We have a question that we come together and say, okay, did we assume the gospel? Did we think someone was in front of us and we didn't share, hey, Jesus is for you? And then we talk about, and this is probably where we get real Lutheran, is we talk about word and sacrament renewal being another part of our culture, to say we really do believe it's important for us to come together weekly, to be under the word, and then to take the sacrament together, to take the Lord's Supper and say, hey, this is a gift given for us. That when we call it a worship service, it's not us serving God, it's him serving us. And we get to be together in this conversation on a weekly basis of saying, hey, our prayer and praise is not like us filling up God's battery. It's our gratitude that he fills ours. And so for us, we built out a liturgy that flows from that, where we're doing Apostles' Creed every week, we're doing Confession Absolution every week, we take communion every week. And a big thing is we slow down and teach them. So, every week before the Apostles' Creed, we say, hey, here's why we're here, saying this, that we say this with the church around the world. Before Confession Absolution, we're like, hey, it's not because you're a horrible sinner you are, but like, we're not trying to make you feel bad. We're trying to bring you back to the promises of Jesus, that when we do confession and absolution, that's why we do this. And then same thing with the Lord's Supper. We go, hey, this is why this is here. This is what it is. And so for us, that's, those two top things are, I think, really key for us. And then we move into discipleship, multiplication, and community on mission being the rest of our culture. But as we've been a uniquely Lutheran church plant, it's learning to say, hey, how do we take these great things we have, these great treasures that at times can be real heady and academic, but how do we take them and teach them? And so we've done sermon series on two kinds of righteousness. We've done vocation. We've done all these different things because we think they're worthwhile. We just got to take time to slow down and realize not everyone knows what those are.
Yeah.
We're living in a world that as we plant churches, basic biblical literacy is a huge piece of what we do. But when it comes to our, uniquely Lutheran theology, it's harder and harder to sit down and go, oh, we're going to do adult confirmation with you. And you just kind of have to be like, when we get you here, we're just going to keep teaching what we believe. And so that, I think, has really formed us really well. And it gives us permission to preach and teach in a way that builds up those everyday mysteries, that allows us to talk about saying, listen, things can be supernatural and incredibly simple. Like, you may be looking for, the thunderbolt of God, and literally he's standing right in front of you because this is what we believe. And I think probably the greatest thing we as Lutherans have to bring to the stage right now is this idea of vocation, to talk about saying, hey, listen, we believe that as God works in us, we then go and do our work in the world. And it doesn't mean we have to create this uniquely, American Christian culture. It means we just walk where we are and do the best we can.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good.
Be prepared to give that answer of who Jesus is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, and I think more and more people other denominations are kind of waking up and seeing, okay, this doctrine of vocation, how important it is. But I agree. I think that's a unique gift that we have as a Lutheran church to offer to the American church. And talking about that, you talked a little bit about confirmation, adult classes outside of the service, and preaching.
Yeah.
You laugh. And preaching and explaining it in the service, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? What do we believe? Those are obvious places. But like on the teaching, adult education, confirmation, how have you approached those two things?
I'm so glad you asked this question. What I think you find in planting a church is it forces you into new paradigms because you don't have space, right? Which is a blessing and a curse. There's part of me that when we finally get rid of our trailer, I will burn it with fire. Like, I know we need to save it for the next church plant, but also I just want to destroy it. But being mobile and meeting in a school means that our resources of space are limited. So we do a lot of things in homes and in coffee shops, and in the extra, we rent the school for 5 hours every Sunday, and we usually only go up to about 3.5. So using that extra time. So we've started we'll have our second one on Sunday. We name things what they are. So and that's because I'm the pastor and I'm really bad at creatively naming things. So on third Sundays of the month, we do narrative studies, which is we'll order in some lunch, and we'll have some video going for the kids of, some Bible project or I think what's in the Bible going on this time around. And then we do Bible study together. And so that's what we're doing on the adult ed side. But a lot of that leans on community groups to say community groups live in the Word. That's really why we want them to be meeting together, is being in the Word together. Confirmation, I don't know about, we come from a little bit of different Lutheran backgrounds, but I would feel pretty assured in saying the phrase "confirmation is broken" has shown up before for you. And the Band-Aid I always hear people go is, well, did you hear about this new curriculum? And it's like, okay, so we're taking the same mode and we're just slapping a new coat of paint on it. And at Narrative, we are struggling with the tension right now that space brings, that time brings, in terms of how do we do this? And we're trying to be creative and saying, okay, what is the real goal we want to see in confirmation? Our goal has changed from the doctrine backwards and forwards to saying you are seeking a church when you leave the nest. Whether it is, whether that means you're going to vocational school or you're sticking around or you're going to college, whatever it is, we want our kids when they leave to be going to church. And so we've been looking at, okay, what does that mean? So we have a community group for our middle and high schoolers, meets twice a month. And
that's youth, that'd be youth group too, right? Basically.
Right. Yeah. And so and right now where I am, that's part of what's under me. So I lead that with one of our other volunteers. And as we talked about it, we said, well, let's build out this curriculum and we'll really go through all this stuff. And I realized we tried to do some of that stuff, but what you look at seeing in terms of growth in people, and there's a bunch of studies that have been done on this, is people who consistently read Scripture grow in their faith. And so our goal now with our next gen community group is to give our kids the tools to read the Bible on their own. That's going to be our sole focus. And what we want to do then is take the catechism and put it back into homes, train our parents how to use it, and then make confirmation more like we would do a baptism, right? That instead of it's like, oh, it's Reformation Day, we're doing confirmation. It's, hey, I think my son or daughter is ready for this. And we'll give parents a checklist to say, here's what we'll be looking for as a church. Here's what you should be looking for as parents. And then confirmation is not a graduation ceremony, but instead is a blessing from the church to this kid. Now, ask me a year from now what we're doing, and I'll tell you if that's working or not.
Okay. No, that's really good. That's beautiful. Yeah.
That's where we're moving with it.
Okay. That's really good. Well, and that kind of leads into here, dovetails with this, maybe my last question here. I know we're already going a little long here, but you and your wife wrote a book entitled The Myth of the Millennial, Connecting Generations in the Church. And y'all, I think 2 years ago, you published this through CPH, maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've not read it yet. Read good reviews on it, and sorry.
No,
I've been waiting for my signed copy. That's what I've been waiting.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. That's on me.
Okay, you want my address? I'll give it to you afterwards. So,
yeah.
So what? I mean, you just spoke to this a little bit, but what was the main thesis of that book? And tell people at the end of it why they need to go read it and pick it up on Amazon. But then, how has the research that you did for that book, how has that informed and shaped how you are ministering to the millennials?
Yes. So we, being solidly millennials ourselves, what we saw was that as we were growing up, we could have a voice in talking in the church about millennials. And so the book basically takes the main stereotypes against millennials and says, sure, there are definitely millennials that are going to be like this, but here are the stories of the ones we know who are not. And then we take, we kind of have a chapter that kind of flips and says, hey, here are the good things that are happening. Here are the ways you can connect with millennials. And our hope would be that churches would read it together. There are questions at the end of each chapter, and you could have a discussion, to say, hey, maybe us blaming things on the young people hasn't had the effect we wanted, or just even to say, oh, I didn't think of it like that. Or it gives opportunity to open the discussion. And for Chelsea and I, as we got ready to plant, we knew we didn't want to be a generation church, right? We didn't want to just say, hey, we are a millennial church, because then your church will die with that generation. And our huge blessing is we have, 6-month-olds, and we have 80-year-olds in our church. And a lot of leadership is millennial. A lot of leadership is baby boomer. A lot of leadership is Gen X. And I already can see the next group of leaders that'll be stepping in, depending on who stays and goes from some of our college students and high school kids, that, Gen Z is going to step into that role too. Because it's easy. I think it's a working of the enemy to try and get us to blame things on other generations. Instead of saying, yeah, we're different, but how are we the same? And to realize that generations, as we talk about them, are all marketing strategies. That's what it is. It's how do we sell to these people? And if the church gets caught up in how do we sell to these people, instead of individualism, which says, how do I talk to this person I know who's a millennial? And that's what we try to break down, to say, yeah, there are going to be people who meet the stereotypes. Like, we get it. Like, and, stop harping on avocado toast. It's delicious. But for us, it really was looking to say, we have friends who are leaving the church. We have friends who are in the church. How do you talk to those people? How do you connect them? And so that was really our heart for it. Narrative has been a huge blessing because we've seen leaders across the board, and I'm blessed to have folks older than me who have been very patient and kind and given me so much wisdom along the way, especially when I was 28 and made a lot of bad decisions. And they've walked alongside of us, and that's been huge. So that was really the purpose, was to say, hey, we're in this together. This isn't, don't get caught up in us versus them.
So how would you encourage church plants, church restarts, renewals, just healthy churches? How do they engage then with millennials and minister to them and invite them into the ministry?
Yeah, I think community is a big part. I think being able to have time together. I think that's something that millennials are seeking. That as we have a group we call Millennial Monday, which is a bunch of our friends, and we get together and eat on Mondays. And actually, my dad named it when he was in town one time, so we didn't even name it, which is great. But last night, and I saw this last night when we were eating together, someone, like 3 people set their phones down in the same place. And someone else goes, oh, are we doing this now? I was like, is this a thing? And so everyone kind of took their phones out and set them down. And we had some of the best discussion I think I've had with our group. And that's not because we're not friends. It was just like, oh, none of us were getting distracted. And millennials crave that. They crave non-distracted community, even though you may have to surgically remove the iPhone, right? And so I think building community, investing, mentors, people who can say, I've been there. We want everyone to see our best side. But you know what? When I'm struggling with finances, what I want to know is that someone ahead of me messed it up. When I'm struggling with my job, I want to know that someone I look up to struggled with their job. And to not feel alone, and then to have this understanding of faith, whether those millennials are in the church or are outside, to be able to sit back and say, this is where God has walked me. This is the journey I'm on. That I think is the book of Psalms, is one generation shall extol your works to the next. The scripture, it's truth, it's how it works. And that's what we need, to be able to sit down and just have a conversation and not feel threatened. So if you're in the business world and you work with some millennials, buy them a coffee, buy them a Snickers, ask if they're on Whole30 first to figure out that. But, those kinds of things, saying how can I invest in someone else? How can I put in that time and go from there?
That's really good. That's great. So are you going to write a book on Gen Z?
No, because I'm not Gen Z. We were at the Super Bowl party, and we had this moment that I felt the clear separation of millennials and Gen Z, in that in the middle of the halftime show, there was a SpongeBob thing that happened, and all of my college kids started cheering, and all of my friends looked at each other like, what is going on? And in that moment, I knew I was out of pop culture and I was old. I was like, okay, here we are. We made it, you know.
You've arrived. You're outdated, Ted.
It's the same thing with my college guys. We buy pizza and play board games together. Like, it's invest time, you know.
So you could republish the book, just how to reach Gen Z, right?
The joke Chelsea and I told was like, it's not a complicated process. Like, find a millennial, buy them lunch, talk to them, repeat. Like,
yeah,
so
no, it's true.
Maybe I will. I'll make some more money.
There you go. Yeah, I'm sure you got rich on that through CPH.
Oh yeah.
No, we love and support CPH. So, yes, that's really good, man. We went a bit long here, and I had a couple other questions that we weren't. We'll tell you what, maybe one more. You got time for like one more question?
I got time. We've now bled into the time that I didn't have time, so now we're good, and I'll just do what I want to do later.
You missed that really important appointment now, or?
Yeah, it was mowing my lawn, so I'll do it tomorrow afternoon. Okay. I'll gladly put that off.
Sacrifice for Jesus.
But my wife is watching this, so I'm going to hear about that.
Okay. Chelsea, thank you for giving us Ted for a few extra minutes here. So a question I jumped over, but this would be really practical for guys. Not that everything else hasn't been practical, but for church planters and, again, people who are maybe trying to revitalize a church as well, one of the challenges is, how do we get out in the community and meet people? How do we get out in the community and meet people? What are some of the ways that you've done outreach, you've met people, created on-ramps for people to come to know what Narrative Church is about, and inviting them into that?
I'm a bad person to ask this question, and here's why. I am not big into, let's be in the, let's go to the local 4th of July thing and set up a booth, or let's be in the local parade. Both of which I think are incredible things, and I've watched other church plants do very well. But for me, I function in relationship. And so it was saying yes to being in relationship in different places. It was finding places to be regulars, to show up and be like, hey, I'm going to show up here Tuesday mornings and work, and I'm going to get to know the people who are here. My wife just texted me and said, don't forget the LWML in Brenham. Anytime you have a chance to stand in front of people's grandmas, do it. We have had the grandma effect bless our church, because we'll go talk to some of these. So for us, the LWML is the Lutheran Women's Missionary League, and they would ask us to come talk. And we would have grandmas go, I'm sending you, my grandkids. They don't have a church. They're in your area. It would be great. And I think relational is key. Outreach events and being in places is, and I'll steal this from my buddy Gabe Casper, who planted a church down here. He was able to recognize the difference between like name recognition and mission outreach. There are some things you're going to do because you want your church to be known in the community, right? You don't have a permanent sign. So you do some things, you might, set up in a park, you might do a movie night, those kinds of things. Those are great. Evangelism is going to keep happening more and more relationally. It's going to keep, as our culture changes, it's going to be a lot more long haul connection to people, as opposed to, here's an invite card, you should come. Now, make invite cards, because we've had people come from invite cards. Do mailings, do door hangers, do those kinds of things, but recognize the difference between saying, hey, what's evangelism and what's name recognition? That you want to invite everyone, right? Like, you've planted this church, you've got a team who's helped plant it, the Lord's at work, you want people to know about it. But slow down, because for us, what we've recognized is the people who have stayed with us, the people who've connected, it's because either they saw us somewhere and came in and connected with someone at church, or we had relationships with them. We've had families, one part of the family starts coming, and then we start seeing, grandkids, and then those grandkids, friends. And so we've seen that. We've seen, just asking folks who, because, like I said, you became a regular somewhere. I really think it's important to say, relational connection is the biggest piece. Being present with people. And it's one of the models. It's what we have done. Mm-hmm. There are other churches who I love, and they do a really good job of marketing, of connecting in places out in the community. For us, we're a relational church. And so for us, it really is saying, invite your friends. Invite people you don't know. One of my favorites was, we've grown a lot. Most of our growth is de-churched, unchurched people. And some of the funny stories are Paul, who's on the, really pushed us forward at Faith, and who is now the president of our congregation, and who's incredible. Before we launched, we had made invite cards, and he was going to the chiropractor, and he got chatting with the receptionist who was there, and he said, "Oh yeah, we're planting this church." And she's like, "Oh, that's interesting. Well, I actually grew up Lutheran." And he goes, "Well, great, we're a Lutheran church." And it's amazing what God's going to put in your way. And I think the key to outreach and connecting with people is never closing your eyes. He put you in a neighborhood for a reason. He put you in a community for a reason. He put you in your place of work for a reason. And it's looking and saying, of course we want to shotgun out into the community. We want to send out as much as we can so people know we're here and we want to help. But he's put me across the street from this person. He's put me next door to this person. He's put me in connection with this guy at the coffee shop. Whatever it is. I think that's key. And the trick is encouraging the folks of your congregation. A narrative is built with a bunch of people who get this and a bunch of people who are learning it, but everyone's on that journey together. And so that's been a huge blessing for us.
That's a great answer. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think especially in our culture, as we shift more and more secular in America, the attractional model is probably going to be less and less effective. In that relation,
or you're going to have to pay more and more for it. That's you're just going to have to keep raising more money.
Yeah. So. Yep. Well, very good. Well, my low battery light just clicked on my phone. So good conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, really some good wisdom here and good encouragement. Keep up the good work there. Church planting is difficult, and I know at times can be discouraging, and full of joys as well. So it's
it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I don't see myself doing anything else. So
praise God. Well, thank you, and thank Chelsea also for both of you.
Thanks for having me.
Pouring out your life for the ministry, and blessings on the rest of your ministry. We'll have you on again sometime when you publish Gen Z.
Yeah, about that.
Okay. Hey, blessings, brother.
Thanks, man.
See you later. Bye.
Talk to you later.